Welcome to episode 106 of the Sports Marketing Machine podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Neisser. Today we're going to talk about buying a list. This could be an email list, could be a database list. We're going to talk about pros, cons, and what you need to know. We know email marketing is one of the most effective tools for sports teams to drive ticket sales, increase merchandise and ticket revenue, and of course increase fan engagement. But when does it make sense to buy a list instead of building one organically? Well, in this episode, we're going to break down when teams should and shouldn't consider buying a list, the benefits, risks, and even the legal implications of using a purchase list, smart alternatives to grow your email database organically, and best practices if you decide to take the plunge and buy one. Let's get right to it. Welcome to the Sports Marketing Machine podcast, the show that helps those working in sports level up their marketing so you can sell more tickets, increase your merchandise sales, and grow your fan base. I'm your host, Jeremy Neisser. Today, we're digging into the topic of buying a list. All right, let's start with the why and the when. Why would a team consider even buying an email list, and when should you consider it, right? So while buying a list, email list, chamber list, whatever it is, it can seem like an easy way to expand your reach. It's not always the best solution. There are scenarios where I would recommend it, and even for teams to consider it. So, number one, let's dig into why a team would buy a list. And when would it make sense? All right, number one, this would make sense if you are a new team in a community, brand new team, just getting started, you've got your staff there, building a list quickly, organically is going to take a while. It's not going to be quick at all. So it's going to be a very labor-intensive process to build a list pretty quickly. So if you buy a list through your chamber and you're targeting for sponsorship outreach or corporate partnership outreach or even group ticket sales, maybe you have a party deck or you have suites, that makes total sense. Brand new team, brand new market, you don't have an email list, you don't have a list at all, you buy it through the chamber, yep, thumbs up. That one totally makes sense. Let's look at another one. Let's say you're expanding your targeting. Let's just say you want to tap into a different audience. So families, students, corporate buyers, those types of things. You can buy lists of new homeowners. Maybe you want to buy a list of grandparents because you have a promotion. That totally makes sense. Maybe you've got this 4-game package that you want to promote, target grandparents. When you buy a list, that is such a great way to be able to target these folks without having to put the elbow grease in to segment and survey and find grandparents in your community. You can easily put that list together. Maybe you've got a new homeowner special. You want to offer a new homeowners in the community 4 tickets to a special game. See if you can turn them into a 1-game attendee, into a multi-game attendee, but they're new homeowners, new people in your community potentially. That one totally makes sense. If you're looking to do that, absolutely, thumbs up. I would give that 100%. That one's great. Or maybe a quick launch or some sort of urgent campaign. Some teams simply don't have the time to build an organic list. Similar to that new team opportunity that I was talking about just a moment ago, but you want to be able to build a list and go after an audience for a specific promotion. Absolutely makes sense for that. You want to build a list that targets families and you got a special promotion for families. Absolutely makes sense. Here's 2 other options of when and why you would buy a list. Maybe you're hosting a one-time special event. Let's just say you work in baseball and you're hosting a soccer game at your facility or a boxing match on your field or something like that, or some sort of charity game. And you want to target an audience who doesn't usually attend your games. purchasing a list for these types of things could make sense. Maybe it's a boxing match and it has two Spanish speaking folks in there that are really popular, and you could go buy a list of the Spanish speaking community in your community. That totally makes sense to buy a list to do something like that. Maybe there's a concert or some sort of soccer match. Buying a list for a one-time event absolutely makes sense. Thumbs up to that one. Maybe you're testing new markets. Maybe you're in a community where you've done pretty good job drawing fans from within a 10-mile or 20-mile radius, but you want to test in other communities. You could run meta ads, you could run display campaigns in those communities, but if you are considering kind of expanding in that market, buying a list of people who are just like the people that you already have on your list that are already buying tickets, buying a list of people who are similar to that, and maybe test for some sort of campaign, that makes sense as well. So those are 5 different ideas of when and why you should buy a list. Potentially chamber, new homeowners, maybe you're targeting for a specific population for a promotion, maybe it's a one-time event, whatever it may be. Those 5 really good ideas to be able to say, yep, going to buy a list. Absolutely. So what are some of the benefits of buying a list? Fast fan base. Like, you've got a fast fan base now. You've got a list, thousands of potential ticket buyers that you could easily reach out to and call or email or what have you. Time and cost savings. It's going to take a while to build a 2,000 person list. It takes a long time to build a list of people for you to be able to reach out to sell tickets to. It's just going to take a while. You've got to go out and you've got to do a lot of different things to be able to build a list. You got to sell tickets. That helps you build the list as well. But if you're just getting going, and you've got a small staff, buying a list totally makes sense. Targeted reach. Some providers offer that segmented data, just like I was talking about, new homeowners, grandparents, those types of things. And this is so great for teams because you can target based on age, location, interest, a lot of different things. And of course, sales potential. A really good list can help you increase ticket sales and merchandise purchases. Yep, thumbs up, absolutely, totally makes sense. What are the best practices if you decide to buy a list? So we've gone through really good why and whens. We've talked about some benefits. So if you decide, hey, I want to buy a list, I'm going to give you some best practices here. You should work with a reputable provider. I have 2 that I highly recommend that I've worked with numerous times and that teams use all across the United States. I'm happy to provide that. I'm going to put my email in the show notes. Feel free to reach out if you've got those, but they help sports teams of all levels to provide you with a very clean list that you'll get. And I think when you get the list, you're going to be quite surprised of what you get there and how quick you get it. And even some cases, the cost. It's actually surprisingly inexpensive when you're buying that. Another best practice is check legal compliance. Can spam, opt-in policies, that's where it's going to get a little bit interesting. If you just buy a big list of, say, 5,000 or 10,000, you might want to separate those into different buckets. So if you got 10,000, maybe you put 1,000 in one email list and 1,000 in another, because what you don't want to do if you're using your email list, you don't want to, or sending out emails, you don't want to immediately siren the warnings about the opportunity that this is a spammy emails that you're sending off. So you kind of have to create segmented lists and go from there. So my point with this one is don't just blast generic emails. Try to come up with a tailored message to each audience. So segment and personalize. And the second point of what I was just saying is instead of emailing everyone at once, start small and monitor engagement. Because if you immediately send it out to everyone and a third of the people say it's spam, it's going to hurt your other efforts with your email list. So gradually warm up the list and then remove unengaged contacts. If people don't open your emails, you've emailed them 10 times and they don't open them, just remove them. That will protect your sender reputation. So really good best practices there. So I've talked about all the pros Now it's time to talk about the cons. So, some of the cons about buying an email list. The data quality can be unpredictable. I've worked with some email list providers where the accuracy is as high as like 80%. So you buy a list of 1,000 people, 800 are great. Like, hey, that's awesome. But there's also that 200 that are outdated or incorrect that lead to bounces, and that is some wasted marketing dollars in there. So I highly recommend to you, if you're going to buy a list, just know that it's not going to be 100% accurate. That is definitely a con. You're going to spend, let's call it $1,000 for 1,000 people. Let's just for simple numbers here. $1,000, 1,000 people. It's going to be a little bit more than $1 per lead because accuracy is going to be probably in the 80% range. If you can get that, that's great. If you get one that's less than that, you really got a bum list there. So 80% is what you would strive for. Low engagement and deliverability issues. This is definitely a con. Even with a good list, recipients didn't sign up directly with you, making them less likely to open or engage. So when you're sending out an email to some folks on a list that you just bought, you're probably going to have low open rates to get started. They may know who you are. They may say, oh yeah, that's the team in town. I've heard of you. I know about you. But they didn't sign up to receive your email. So you may only get a 10% or a 15% or even 20% email list. So I want you to keep an eye on your open rates and your engagements from the list, because what you definitely don't want to fall into the category of complaint levels, which can damage your sender reputation, which would ultimately lead to your future emails ending up in the spam folder, even if you've got legitimate subscribers. So that's what happens sometimes. It's definitely a con with buying a list, is you're going to get low engagement and even deliverability issues. So the simple answer is because people didn't sign up to be on your list. They didn't buy a ticket. You just bought a list with their name on it and you started emailing them. Totally makes sense. Every team does this that buy lists, or they'll send out a postcard, something like that, some sort of mailer. But this definitely leads to low engagement, deliverability issues. So highly recommend for you to definitely warm up the list, segment, and personalize. And then the third con is your ROI is going to be uncertain. Many teams overestimate the value of a purchase list. Let's pretend for a second we paid for 1,000 people on the list, paid for $1,000 for it. Now, if only a fraction of the recipients engage and convert, the investment may not justify the cost, especially compared to you putting the elbow grease in to organically build your list. So when you look at this, if you get a 5% ROI on your list, or 5% conversion rate on your list, you paid $1,000 for 1,000 people on your list, and if you did 5%, which if math serves me right, that's 50 people. If you get 50 people to buy XYZ package, and you know, hey, that's going to get me a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 ROI, yep, you're there. There you go. So I would definitely go on the low end side. If you did 5%, I'd say that's pretty good. But if you did a little bit lower than that, more closer to the 3%, that's probably about spot on where you're going to be, depending if you're doing email or some sort of mailer or what have you. So ROI is going to be uncertain, but just know we're going to estimate it conservatively because we have no idea how popular this is going to be, which goes back to my point earlier. When you buy that list, make sure it is segmented. You want to get a list that is specific to what you are targeting. Just like we were targeting grandparents with a specific promotion where they can bring their grandbabies to the game, or new homeowners, you want to be able to track that as well. So those are some big downfalls that you should think through as you're buying the list. Main takeaways for today. Buying a list is such a great way for you to quickly target and have people to go after, be able to sell tickets to or merchandise or what have you. If you are hosting a one-time event, soccer, a concert, some sort of charity game, buying a list for that makes sense. You're targeting a different demographic or a different list, new homeowners, grandparents, absolutely. New sports team, absolutely makes sense to be able to buy a list. You've got a quick launch or some sort of urgent campaign. Absolutely do that. You're testing a new market. Maybe you're testing something 20 minutes of your of where your team plays. Makes sense to be able to build a list. But just know in the back of your mind that you're probably going to have an 80% accuracy with the list that you purchased. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be 100%. If you got 80% accuracy rate, I'd say that's an absolute win. Be sure when you're putting them into your email list, if you're going to do that, gradually warm up the list. So put a few in one list, put a few in another, and gradually start adding emails and emailing. Don't do it all at once. That's really going to set off the spam filters and opt-in policies and all these issues. There's a thing called canned spam, which is a legal and compliance thing with emails. So start off with a small list, segmented, personalized, and then warm up to be able to add the rest instead of just blasting everybody as soon as you buy the list. So there you go. There's some pros, some cons, and some best practices for you as you consider buying an email list. Buying an email list can definitely be tempting. Often risky, sometimes ineffective, but if you think about the right approach, just like we were discussing here, you can really buy a very great engaged list and going after a specific targeted audience to be able to sell a specific thing, whatever it may be. Building it organically should be numero uno. Hey, this is on our list. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do it through the season. We're going to do it in the off season. We are absolutely going to be able to build an organic list, and you absolutely should, because 1,000 engaged fans is far more valuable than 10,000 folks who have never engaged, but you have them on your list. So it's not always the size that matters in your email database. Sometimes in most cases, it's all about the engaged fans, as they're more valuable than just a bunch of random emails. And there are people who don't open your emails, or even with the postcard mailings as well. So in selling tickets, buying lists and what have you, quality beats quantity every time. Well, that's it for today's episode. Appreciate you tuning in. If you found this episode helpful, please take a moment to share a positive rating or review on Apple or Spotify. It would mean the world to me, but also get this podcast in front of people who are just like you. People trying to get more people to their games, grow their fan base, and have a blast while they're doing it. Until next time.